Welcome to Inspire Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Welcome back, everybody. Another week's passed, and before I go into the topic of the day, I just want to reach out and give everybody who joined in the last podcast a very, very warm thank you. You have my gratitude. I hope you enjoyed doing this, and I'm hoping that we actually are going to be able to do that some more to get people to come on board and share some of their experiences about change. And as I said in the last session, this is not just all about men, although the focus is men. But we men don't live in isolation. We don't live on an island, and we really need to focus on the capacity to engage in warmer, more intimate, more open, more transparent relationships with each other. So again, thank you very much. I loved hearing all this stuff. And as I said, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do some more of this. So I'm going to take a detour from the coronavirus, the COVID-19 crisis in some respects, because I want to focus on something that's very, very dear to my heart and has been for a very, very long time. And then that is focusing on men's health. Okay, so, we could write a whole book on the issues that men face in regard to their health and how many of us actually really don't take care of ourselves that well. In working with men for the past, almost 40 years as a psychotherapist and a psychologist, one of the challenges that I have is getting men to understand that in as much it's been very courageous for them to come to see me about their mental health, their physical health is as important. I talk about the fact that you can't have a calm mind in a tense body. Now, the starting point for good overall health and well-being is in fact taking care of ourselves physically. One of the first steps in our growth as a human being from, birth on is learning to, in effect, master our physical being, to learn to respect it in all its forms, including the capacity to be careful about how we use our strength. Now, on average, most men have a 25% advantage over most women, even when they've been really well trained. So to have that power, and with power comes great responsibility, we really need to pay attention to that. But the other aspect of our health and well-being as men is that in the patriarchal socialization, we're taught to be competitive, so that we have this idea about the more competitive I am, the more successful I'm going to be, and the more higher up I'm going to be in the food chain. Therein lies a few problems, because indirectly what it teaches us as men is to take risks, especially when our socialization has engendered an acquired narcissism. Is that we go through our childhood and our adolescence, learning in a sense messages about being bulletproof, right? And with it, if we hurt, we suppress it, we repress it. And again, it's not just emotional hurt. We're talking about physical hurt as well. Oh no, she'll be right. So one of the things that I found in all my years of practice is that the first thing I often have to do with some of the men who come to see me is go, you need to go and have a medical. You need to, if you haven't got a GP, I'm happy to refer you to, I'll give you 3 names choose one or speak to friends or colleagues about who they go and see, but get a GP that you can establish a relationship with and who you can open up to. Now, apparently, there's a web page or app going around that encourages men to get their medical checks online because it saves them the embarrassment and the shame of going to see a doctor. I find that absolutely ridiculous. You know, the message to us as men is we need to get over any sort of resistance to being open, and that includes about our physical health. The number of times that I've had men come in with some fairly serious health conditions that they've been ignoring often for a few years, hoping that either it's going to get better or that there's not enough time, I'm caught up with work and all that. That is unconscionable, not just in terms of your own relationship with yourself, but also to the people that you love. It's irresponsible. So I take a fairly hard line on that. And so often I'll spend quite a bit of time going through with men about some of their physical conditions and, do they get good sleep? How they're exercising? What's their blood pressure like? Has the doctor flagged anything if they've recently been that they might need to pay attention to, but they're not? And so my encouragement constantly is, I'm a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I've got enough experience, however, to know when something flags where I go, this isn't really a good situation, and you need to take a look into that. The other aspect of it is that a lot of us, as men, often carry injuries that we're reluctant to address. Now, I'm the first one to put my hand up with that and go, I'm in that basket. I've been surfing for 40 years and I've got essentially surface shoulders and essentially my brother-in-law, who's an orthopedic surgeon, has been encouraging me to get surgery, but I keep putting it off. So I'm, in essence, one of those offenders. But at the same time, when it comes to other aspects of my physical well-being, I'm right on top of it. So I have regular checks, and that includes my cardiovascular health. It includes blood tests. It includes stress tests, and some of the other experiences like genital urinary tract stuff mightn't be pleasant, but it's really, really important. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the issue of, at the moment, prostate cancer. I just recently received a message from a friend of mine, and I'm going to read that out because I think it's a really heartfelt message, and he's really wanting to reach out. So I want to assist in that because it's a really, really important aspect. So I'm going to read this message out, and he says, to all of my friends, many of you, like me, are reaching that age where, apart from the current life in the age of COVID, we're hearing more and more stories of inevitable illnesses and the passings of our loved and dear ones. Also, like me, the men here have supported November and raised funds for prostate cancer awareness. I've just had a couple of bouncy months, to say the least. Diagnosed with an angry and aggressive prostate cancer in February, I have just had radical surgery. The surgery has saved my life. The reason for this message is that since my hospitalisation, I have spoken to many men, 50 and above, who haven't or can't be asked to get a prostate blood test. A little background on my diagnosis. I had a random health check in November, had a blood test, etc. The results, fabulously healthy, and as I've made some effort to lose a little around the time, and my tummy in recent years, my GP complimented me on my healthier regime, except one thing. My PSA, the prostate cancer marker, was not high. In fact, it was relatively low. But, the doctor said, it has gradually increased for the last 3 years. My prudent doc just suggested I get it checked out as it's not just the amount of PSA, it's the velocity of change. It wasn't high at all, but it creeped up a tiny bit each year. So cut to 3 months later, I reluctantly and uncomfortably call myself a cancer survivor, only because I had prostate test. Untested, I would be dead in months. So this message is not so much about me, yet I'm overwhelmed with so many of you who have sent me so many wishes of support and love. Thank you. It's about you or your partner or your husband. It's a call for you to please, please have a regular prostate blood test. Like me, you may only remain alive because of it. So this is a really, really important message, and one that I try to get across all the time. Like my friend, in recent months, I had some challenges as well. Now, I didn't have prostate cancer, but what I had was prostatitis, which was the inflammation of the prostate gland. Now, to put it bluntly, it's a bloody uncomfortable thing to experience. Now, I was fortunate I didn't need to have surgery. What the treatment regime was several courses of antibiotics to get the infection and the inflammation down. So, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories help with the inflammation and the antibiotics help with the infection. But the thing that I took out of this was when I first went to the doctor with the problem, he naturally said, let's get a blood test, let's see what's going on. And I only recently, last November, had a blood test for my PSA, and it was very, very low. And I was chuffed. Couldn't have been happier. When I went back with the prostatitis, one of the things that bounced off the screen for me was that my PSA levels were high. It was about, I think, 6.9. And so I'd gone from a low end, which was, I think it was either 2 or 4, to 6.9. And I freaked because my first reaction was, shit, I've got prostate cancer. And the doctor reassured me very, very quickly, and he said, no, there doesn't appear to be that issue. What we're looking at is this thing called prostatitis. Now, in all my experience working with men, for some reason, that particular problem had slipped my attention. It was a first to me, and I went, firstly, how do you get this? Why did I get it? And how can we treat it? And how can I prevent it in future? Now, it would have been very, very tempting in a way to ignore this because the discomfort was there. But because I already had a few other infections, and the other message that I got amidst the coronavirus pandemic was that I was in a high risk group because I've had a series of chest infections, sinus infections that I was being treated for, and then a urinary tract infection and prostatitis. So I was stuck in what I comfortably refer to as a shit show. Now, my friend who sent me the message was obviously much worse off, but the impact emotionally was quite significant, and I can read between the lines in this message that it was very, very scary. And despite the fact that mine didn't require surgery, I share that experience of suddenly, going, hang on a minute. And like most of us, when we get confronted with stuff like that, we have a tendency to catastrophize. We jump ahead and, frequently think about the worst case scenario. Now, interestingly enough, for a lot of men, they have the experience of going, oh, this could be really, really bad, but then they don't do anything about it. They avoid seeking help. And again, it's physical and mental health that they avoid getting helpful. We need to get over that resistance, this idea that somehow we've got to keep this mask on about being bulletproof. It kills us. We have cancers that could be cured if they're detected earlier, and we have mental health issues that if we open up and address properly, like depression, alienation, also anxiety disorder, all sorts of things that can lead to suicide. We could really have a major impact in reducing the death and trauma that's left behind with this sort of stuff. And some men, I really do believe, occasionally are neglectful of their physical health as a sort of slow form of suicide. It sounds maybe a little bit out of the box, but it's true. That lack of self-care is almost a nihilistic attitude. We're given one life. Let's do something with it and not avoid the unpleasantries. We need to get used to staying with the pain and working through it. This is where I get very, very irritated when people say stay positive. You can stay positive if you've got all the dots, the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and we go through the regular checkups and so on. But doing that in a vacuum is irrational. Positivity becomes an irrational, delusional state. We need to focus. We need to understand and appreciate that we need to allow ourselves to sit in discomfort because it can save our life. One of the things with prostate checkups is a lot of guys go, I'm not going to have someone stick their finger up my ass, and I'm going to be very blunt here. Well, in that case, you may be facing something a lot worse. Think about most women have to have fairly intrusive, regular gynecological checkups. Most women don't avoid them. They do it, and they do it regularly. And I don't see why we as men should be any different. We need to just do it. Think about it, make the appointment, and get regular checkups, especially, in my view, from the age of 40 onwards. And if you've got a track record in your family of cancers, whether that be bowel cancer, prostate cancer, and so on, it might be worthwhile talking to your doctor, even when you're in your early 30s, about what the process would be to manage, that particular vulnerability in your genetic makeup. Now, it's not just the genes, it's also lifestyle. Some of the, issues that I deal with happen to be with, the consequences of certain addictions. So if you're drinking a lot of alcohol, you need to consider what that ultimately is going to do to your whole system, especially your liver, okay? So again, this is really very much about an awareness campaign that I'm constantly running, and I've been running for as long as I've been working with men. And it doesn't matter whether they're, super troopers like out of the special forces, police officers. We're not good collectively and individually at taking care of ourselves. And it's physical and mental, psychological. So please take my friend's letter, message as an encouragement, as something that you can do. Remember his last line, like me, you may only remain alive because you get the checkup. So, in the next couple of sessions, I might focus a little bit more on different aspects of the interrelationship between mental and physical health, keeping in mind that I'm not a doctor. But I think ultimately in the future, one of the things that we're going to see is a time when we don't see psychological and physical as entirely separate, like two entities. It's a bit like space, time, and physics. They're interrelated. You can't have one without the other. And on that note, hopefully that's going to inspire a whole bunch of you. And if you are a woman, think about the men in your life. If they're not doing them, hassle them. I know he might go, stop nagging me, but it's better than a funeral. And until next time, I'm signing off. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change with Gunter. This is Miranda Spigner-Sapone, executive producer of Inspire Change for iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Podcast, and Google. I wanted to insert a little note. Like I said, last week we had the very special episode where we had people from across the nation sharing their stories of inspired change. And we had one person's story did not air. So I'm going to air that now, shortly. And that is Laura Medina. She did get shouted out and thanked with everybody else, but for some reason, to a technical difficulty when we were loading it to the network, her story got muted. So I'm going to air that now, and please enjoy Laura Medina's story of inspiring change.
This is Laura Medina. Since kids are falling behind the learning curve because their parents, unless they're teachers themselves, are bored, run out of ideas to keep their kids entertained and educated. I'm thankful that TV and movie publicists are sending me screeners that are relevant to today's pandemic, like teaching kids to watch True Terror with Robert Englund. Yes, Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street. He's teaching these kids that if you don't learn your history or know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. In the first episode of True Terror on Wednesday night at 10 p.m. on the Travel Channel, they did a segment about people legitimately being buried alive because of smallpox and malaria. And this unfortunate practice was so common that there's a legitimate phobia that President Lincoln himself has also feared. And unfortunately, it also relates to the poor victims of today's COVID-19 virus victims, particularly what New York City is forced to do. They had to temporarily, unfortunately, bury the victims temporarily. I hope you don't forget about them in public parks. So if you have a bored-ass teenager who's giving you a lot of sass and you're driving yourself nuts because you don't know how to educate them or entertain them, let them watch True Terror with Robert Englund on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. on the Travel Channel. Scare them straight with history.
Again, thank you for listening to Inspire Change with Gunter. Please tune in every Wednesday on your favorite network outlet, whether it be iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Alexa, Deezer, Castbox FM, or whichever is out there. There's a ton of podcasts that we keep picking up new networks all the time. There will be more opportunities. If you have ideas or questions, please reach out to development@noirtainment.com and someone will get back to you and take your request. In the meantime, we will be having more opportunities to be a part of the show and guest spots, live shows, and other exciting. Thank you again, and practice kindness and balance in moderation.
Love can take us so high. Love can take us up amongst the stars. And I can see that. Look into your eyes. Love can take us higher. Yeah, love can take us higher. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Love can take us up amongst the stars.